VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And thank you for joining us on Crosstalk today, coming your way from VCY America. Ladies and gentlemen, the question today is what's happening at the U.S.-Mexico border? If you depend on the established media in the country, you'll come away with the idea that U.S. agents are firing tear gas at barefooted, diapered children who are trying to gain asylum with their moms to our nation. Some media have declared that there's no evidence of rock throwing or projectiles being thrown at our agents. We even have a Congresswoman-elect, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has compared the caravan members who stormed our border this past weekend to Jewish families fleeing Nazi Germany. So the question is, what's really taking place at our border, and how do we as a nation deal with the matter? Well, joining us here on Crosstalk today, we welcome Andrew Arthur, going by Art Arthur. He's a resident fellow in law and policy for the Center for Immigration Studies, a Washington D.C. based research institute that examines the impact of immigration on American society. He does come from an extensive background, having working as a trial attorney in the district counsel's office of the former Immigration and Naturalization Service, promoted then to Associate General Counsel, leading acting chief of the National Security Law Division. He had moved forward as well into later becoming counsel in the House Judiciary Committee, appointed to the immigration bench some 8 years ago as an immigration judge. He left that bench back and went back to Capitol Hill, where he served as staff director of the National Security Subcommittee at House Oversight and Government Reform before he retired from federal service in 2016. As we mentioned, now with the Center for Immigration Studies. Art, good to have you back with us on Crosstalk.
Great to be here. Thank you so much.
Let's do away with the liberal media narrative. Tell us about this clash at our southern border this past weekend. Could you describe for us what really did take place?
Well, we saw hundreds of people approach the port of entry at San Ysidro, and when they were unable to enter the port of entry, they then attempted to breach a fence at the port of entry, and Border Patrol had to respond to that breach of the fence. Projectiles were hurled at the Border Patrol agents, and they responded by firing tear gas and by attempting to seal up the hole in the border.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that the former administration, Obama administration, they used tear gas back several years ago when a group came and throwing rocks at border agents as well.
That's correct. About once a month, the Obama administration actually had to resort to the use of tear gas against individuals who were attempting to breach the border with Mexico. So, yeah, this is not an uncommon happening. And again, you know, I live in the city of Baltimore, where occasionally we have unrest there, and tear gas is a common tool used to respond to riots. And, of course, by law, a riot is any group of 3 people or more who were attempting to create civil disorder. So basically, they were simply responding to a riot along the southern border.
Well, we've had a lot of media that's focused on this woman fleeing with 2 diapered children. Several questions. Why would any parent concerned for the well-being of their children even take their children to the front line of a clash and put their children into a violent situation?
You know, that really is an excellent question for a variety of reasons. The first of which is that she was headed toward a fence that was topped with accordion razor wire. One of the children was in a diaper, the other one didn't have shoes on, so it really does sort of raise the question as to why exactly she decided to be there. Now, keep in mind that Rodney Scott, who is the chief Border Patrol agent in the San Diego sector, has indicated that this group of individuals put women and children in the front of the group and used them as human shields, so perhaps that explains why she was there, but it still doesn't explain why exactly she was there at that time with these 2 children attempting to breach that border.
So is that natural course of asylum seekers to put women and children on the front lines?
Absolutely not. I believe that this was nothing more than either an attempt to enter the United States illegally without seeking asylum through massive force, or alternatively, it was political theater intended to elicit a response from the Trump administration that could then be used to gain more sympathy for the individuals who were part of this caravan.
And indeed, you talk about political theater, and as some pointed out, many events appear to be staged. Even when you see this woman running with her two children, you also see other individuals. You see camera, crews that are set up ready to take pictures. You see a couple of individuals posing as if they are fleeing. Are we just seeing a lot of staged events?
I would hate to say that, and the reporter in question who took the picture was from Reuters, so that is a legitimate news outlet. However, it's possible that many of the individuals who were actually involved in this intended to pose in such a way that it would make it seem like they were fleeing from some sort of peril or danger that was being inflicted upon them by the United States government.
Mm-hmm. Howard Arthur with us here today from Center for Immigration Studies. CNN even had a report, no evidence of rock throwing. Border agents are saying otherwise, aren't they?
They sure are, and the fact is that even Kevin McAleenan, who is the commissioner of CBP and who received a presidential award under President Obama, has stated that, in fact, projectiles were hurled at agents and that agents were assaulted and that they had to respond. But it is an odd situation in which officers of the United States government make a claim of something and then, the press goes, well, where's the proof of that? Well, the proof is the statements that are made, and quite frankly, Commissioner McAleenan has said that, Secretary of Homeland Security Nielsen has said that, and the head of the Border Patrol Agents Union, Brandon Judd, has said that. Three very reputable sources. So quite frankly, if they say it, I believe it happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe also, according to the San Diego Chief Border Patrol Agent Rodney Scott, he mentioned they did not use the dispersion techniques like the tear gas until they had several of their border agents that were struck by projectiles. We're talking about bottles, we're talking about rocks and other instruments thrown at the agents.
Absolutely. And I've been along the southwest border. I've been over, there was one time in particular when I was in Calexico in a Border Patrol van, and a cinder block just flew over the wall and landed on top of the van. So these are not uncommon events. But, it's the massive scale of individuals and the attempts to breach both the security of the United States and the safety of the officers that I think that led to the result that we had.
Homeland Security officials said last week that there were more than 500 criminals traveling with the migrant caravan. What do we know about that?
We don't really know a whole lot about it. It was actually Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen who said that 500 criminals and gang members were actually part of the caravan. And I actually have it from a very good source that is based upon excellent intelligence, because they have been able to identify many of the individuals who are traveling along with this caravan. They've been moving to Mexico. So the Mexican government really does have a pretty good grasp of who these folks are. But I can't tell you anything at all about the crimes that they've committed or what they've done, which gangs they're in, because unfortunately to this point the Department of Homeland Security has not released that information. The other thing to keep in mind, however, is that there are probably more than 500 criminals that are part of this because, of course, we only know the ones who have been identified. We don't know the crimes committed by individuals who have not put themselves through the normal screening process to come to the United States.
Yeah, and I guess when we look at what happened this past weekend, I mean, doesn't the event of storming our border indicate lawlessness in itself, breaching our laws in order to gain entrance? I mean, that's lawlessness in itself.
That is lawlessness in itself. It's not the first time that we saw it, because the fact is we saw them do the same thing to enter from Honduras into Guatemala. We saw them do the same thing to enter from Guatemala into Mexico. So quite frankly, these actions are not consistent with individuals who believe in the rule of law and order, and entering the United States illegally is consistent with that.
Do we know if terrorists have crossed our border?
Actually, my colleague Todd Benson actually put out a report today that talks about 15 known terrorists who have been stopped after crossing the border, and I would strongly recommend that anyone who's interested go to our website, www.cis.org, and read Mr. Benson's excellent report. Mr. Benson was previously an intelligence officer with the Texas Department of Public Safety, and he's actually before that, he was a well-regarded and highly lauded reporter. So this is not a person who comes at this with an agenda. This is a person who comes at this with a very clear-eyed understanding of the dangers facing the people and the institutions of the United States.
Again, folks, that website is CIS.org, standing for Center for Immigration Studies, CIS.org. Art, if these people are truly seeking asylum, isn't that available to them in Mexico?
It is, and in fact, it's available to them in Guatemala, too. Both Mexico and Guatemala are signatories of the 1967 Protocol to the 1951 Refugee Convention. So, and in fact, asylum law in Mexico is actually broader than it is in the United States. It's fairly circumscribed in the United States to 5 different categories, whereas individuals who are fleeing, violence and disorder can actually seek asylum in Mexico and receive it in that country.
What is the condition of our border wall? We know that there's been some construction going on. What's been complete? How many miles have been complete? What do we know there?
Well, there are about just over, I believe, about 700 miles of border wall that are complete. But you have to keep in mind that we have a 1,990-mile border with Mexico. Now, much of that is rough terrain. It's very difficult to cross. Some of it is mountainous, and that creates a natural barrier. In certain places, we have levees, but that border wall is still largely incomplete and subject to being crossed by individuals who have malified intent into the United States.
I understand, though, the portion of the new border wall that's been erected, the Border Patrol chief said not a single migrant has climbed over that.
Absolutely, and we know that a number of prototypes have been tested by CBP and are ready to be used. And quite frankly, I think that it's incumbent upon now the 116th Congress to fully fund what they claimed they were going to do back in 2006, and that's to have a secure fence that we can use to protect the American people.
President Trump, he's wanting, I think, at least $5 billion for this border wall, but so far the opposition party, they've not been willing to go any higher than, some $1.6 billion?
That's correct, and quite frankly, most of that money is earmarked simply to repair the fence where it needs to be repaired.
Mm-hmm. We have the military engaged at the southern border. What has been their primary role?
Their primary role has been one of logistics. They've been supporting and supplying the Border Patrol. Under the Posse Comitatus Act, of course, they're very limited in their law enforcement authority in the United States, so they've primarily played a logistical role thus far. But they still free up Border Patrol agents to actually do the job of patrolling the border.
And I understand they've been laying some razor wire as well?
That's true. They've been putting up accordion wire, razor wire along the border to help shore up the fence, particularly in, the San Ysidro area where we saw the event occur the other day.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Art Arthur, our guest here today, resident fellow in law and policy for the Center for Immigration Studies. We're talking about our southern border storm this past weekend and border agents taking measures to disperse the crowds, firing tear gas, and taking other measures. We're going to discuss further as to some solutions. Where do we go from here in all of this, as well as some of the statements that are coming forth as to from one Congresswoman-elect in particular as to her thoughts on the border issue. We'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and creation researcher with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, when the Ice Age happened, was the Earth just covered in snow, like one big snowball?
Not at all, Chris. But there is a lot of evidence that the ice sheets, which started up in Canada, did come down into the U.S., but they didn't cover the entire globe at all. Actually, the Ice Age wasn't a time of bitter cold either. The summers were probably colder, such that the ice and snow which fell during the winter did not melt, but the winters were probably warmer on average than today. Today, if it gets really cold, it doesn't snow much because the cold air can't hold much moisture. The warmer the air, the more the moisture, the more the snow. And that's what's needed for an ice age. Just such a combination of factors would have happened right after the flood, essentially caused by the flood. By the way, that's the flood mentioned back in Genesis.
For more on the foundational principles set forth in Genesis, visit us on the web at www.icr.org.
So our southern border has been stormed, and I tell you, the media has come out in full force to criticize the actions that are being taken, putting together the plight of the barefoot diapered children and tear gas being hurled at them. And folks, there's another story that's going on at the border that you need to know about. And we're talking today with Art Arthur, who is the resident fellow in law and policy for the Center for Immigration Studies. Their website is cis.org, cis.org. Some of these statements that are coming from the newly elected Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she said that instead of sending 5,000 troops to the border, we should have sent 5,000 caseworkers to review and process the visa applications. And then she went on to compare the migrants compare them to the Jews fleeing Nazi Germany. It scares me here, Art, that she's going to be, seated in the U.S. Congress just a little over a month from now.
Well, fortunately, she's only one of 435, so we've still got 434 others who probably have a different opinion. Now, that's going to be on a spectrum of people, but I think that most members of Congress understand that we have a problem along the southwest border, particularly when we get 23,121 family units as we did last month. I mean, these are women and children and, fathers coming with their children to the United States. And again, they know that once they get into the United States that they're just simply going to be released. And the more of those people that we allow into the United States, the more that we release, the more that we're going to get until eventually we truly will have a humanitarian crisis on the border that will have to be dealt with.
Where do we go from here? What are some viable solutions to where things stand at this point?
Well, the good news is that there is a notice of proposed rulemaking out of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services that would undo what's called the Flores Settlement Agreement. Under the Flores Settlement Agreement, minors, both accompanied and unaccompanied minors, can only be detained for 20 days. And the fact is that the president has made clear that he does not like the policy of separating families, which means that generally families will get released after 20 days, and they know that. That's why they make the dangerous trip to the United States. And let me just underscore some of the dangers of that trip. About 10% of all women who make that trip to the United States are going to be sexually assaulted. 2/3 of all the people who make that trip to the United States are going to be assaulted in one way or another. And Doctors Without Borders has stated that 7% of the people that they treat have actually been shot during that trip to the United States. So we're talking about a situation that is starting to verge right now on a humanitarian problem, and it's a humanitarian problem that's created because of the laws of the United States, not because of the fear that these people have. Most of these people simply want to come to the United States to have a better life. They want to take advantage of American schools, American health care, and a higher standard of living in this country, and that's certainly understandable. Unfortunately, it's just not legal. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, I think, is probably, a lone voice or, one of few voices who actually militate in favor of some of these things. But, keep in mind, she was the original one who came up with the idea to abolish ICE, and that was taken up by many reputable members of Congress.
Yes.
So it's going to be a rough 2 years for those of us who believe in the rule of law and order.
What about, the rule of law is so critical in all of this, and to have that as a foundation in this matter. When we take a look at some sort of immigration reform through legislative means, it appears that we're kind of at a stalemate between the both sides of the aisle on this issue. Is there a path forward?
Well, I actually think there's going to be an opportunity for a path forward because the Supreme Court is soon going to have to rule on the fate of 690,000 people who currently have deferred action for childhood arrival status, or DACA. And it's probably going to rule that the Department of Homeland Security, the president, has the ability to end DACA and end this, legal, illegal status that President Obama granted these people back in 2012. And the Democrats are going to be interested at that time in making a deal as it relates to those 690,000 people. So I think that the president, and I think that Mitch McConnell in the Senate. I think that, Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise in the House are going to have an opportunity to, get some concessions out of the Democrats that will help to address these issues. The fact is that until we fix the Trafficking Victims Protection Relief Act, which basically requires the release of all third country unaccompanied alien children into the United States, until we fix the Flores settlement agreement, until we plug the credible fear loophole that these people are exploiting to come to the United States. 89% of all credible fear claims that are heard are granted. So that'll give you an idea of why so many people want to come into the United States and claim credible fear. Because they want to get in here, they want to claim credible fear, get granted credible fear, and then be released for asylum hearings that might be 6 or 7 years in the future, during which time they can live and work in the United States and gain equities in this country.
To the many who are listening right now to the broadcast, Art, and wondering, I'm just one individual, what can I do? Is there some way I can get engaged in this process? What do you say to that person?
Absolutely, and there are a number of things that you can do. The first place I'm going to recommend that you go to, and this is self-interested, but go to our website, www.cis.org, and read what we, publish every day. I break down each of these issues into very understandable sound bites. Immigration can be a complicated issue, but, sound bites is probably the wrong word, into very understandable concepts. It's a complex issue, but it's not really a difficult issue. And the way forward is generally not the way that the press would tell you is the way forward, but rather it's by amending our laws. Go there, read what exactly the problems are, and then reach out to your members of Congress, reach out to your senators, and even your local elected representatives, and tell them that you want to see the critical changes that are needed in order for us to control the border again, in order for us to ensure that people don't have a reason to undertake this amazingly dangerous journey to the United States. And by the way, one other thing, this journey actually puts money into the pockets of the drug cartels. Mexico is the biggest producer of heroin in the United States. Mexico is the biggest producer of methamphetamine in the United States. So the same money that goes to pay the smugglers helps to support those drug industries, and it helps to grow them. It helps to put poison on our streets, both the streets of our cities and the streets of our small towns. So it's absolutely critical that these issues be addressed. Now,
you also mentioned things on a local level, and we see on a local level that there are many communities or regions that are declaring themselves to be sanctuary cities, sanctuary sites. Does that pose a problem to our sound immigration law here across the land?
Absolutely, because quite frankly, California is a sanctuary state, but California can't make people who live in California stay in California. Those people will make their way to Arizona and Utah and Montana, eventually make their way across the United States. It also poses a danger to the communities in which these people live, because the fact is, sanctuary policies really only benefit criminals. It's only criminals who are let back out on the streets through these sanctuary programs, and they return to the communities from which they come, and those communities are generally immigrant communities. So tragically, and perhaps ironically, the individuals who politicians claim they're attempting to help the most, they're hurting the most.
President Trump has even warned of closing the border altogether. Your thoughts on that?
Section 215A of the INA gives the President of the United States the ability to set parameters on entry to this country, and the Supreme Court has found that's pretty strong authority. We've actually closed the border a few times before in response to the murder of DEA agent Kiki Camarena, following the assassination of President Kennedy. And in fact, President Nixon closed it in order to stem the flow of drugs from Mexico. So it's possible to do that. Now, the only problem is it's going to adversely affect the economy of the United States because a lot of commerce flows over that border, but it's going to hurt the Mexican economy a lot more. And it's going to, really give the Mexicans a reason to cooperate with us. And they have been cooperating with us as it relates to this caravan of individuals who are in Tijuana today.
The Commissioner of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, this would be Kevin McAllion, he had indicated that our current law is inviting and incentivizing caravans. Would you agree with that?
No, I couldn't agree more. And in fact, Commissioner McAleen, and probably stole that from me. It truly does. The laws that we have right now are just ridiculous as it relates to an invitation to individuals to come to the United States, to undertake the dangerous journey, to bring their children to this country, or worse, to send for their children, to trust their children to smugglers to bring them to the United States so that they can come here and start a new life. These laws are, we know the laws are bad. Quite frankly, everybody knows what the problems with the laws are, but Congress hasn't had the will up to this point to act on them. Congress is going to have to act on them soon, or we will have a humanitarian disaster at the border.
Yeah, and there is talk of further caravans making their way to the border as well. Is that a legitimate concern?
Absolutely. Nothing succeeds like success, and quite frankly, we've got, 3,000 people in Mexicali. I think we got 6,000 over in Tijuana. So, we've got a huge number of people who are waiting to come into the United States. These folks in the home countries have seen that this is a way for them to make it to the United States, which is the goal, understandably, for many people around the world. And they want to take advantage of that. They want to exploit that, and they want to come to the United States. And I think that we're going to start seeing more and bigger caravans come to this country. Now, the only question becomes what sort of reception they receive on the way. This time around, many Mexican cities had, mariachi bands and lucha libre wrestling for the amusement of the people who were coming through. But I think that, by the sixth caravan, that welcome mat is going to be pulled, and a lot of people are going to feel the way that the people of Tijuana feel, used and abused by these individuals.
All right, we're going to be letting you go here, but what is it you'd like to leave with our listeners today, most important for them to know about this clash that's happening at that southwest border?
This is a man-made disaster, and it's a man-made disaster that's been made by bad laws that have been that are the fault of both judges, the judges implementing the Flores Settlement Agreement, as well as Congress in the Trafficking Victims Protection Act and in various other laws, the Credible Fear Law. These are vulnerabilities that have been exploited. We know they've been exploited. These loopholes need to be plugged. Congress knows they need to be plugged. They need to act on them.
Very good. And the website, CIS.org, CIS.org, with all that's happened this past weekend. I know that there's been a lot on your plate, and we thank you for carving out the time, Art, to be with us here this afternoon.
I truly am grateful to you and to your audience for the time that you've given me.
Great. Thanks so much. Bye-bye
Have
now.
a great one.
Thanks. That was Art Arthur with us, a resident fellow in law and policy for the Center for Immigration Studies. And, folks, we're going to open our phone lines to get your reaction to these issues here today on Crosstalk. Your comments on this very matter, the clash that's taking place, the lawlessness that is going forth, of course, the fake news that is coming from so much media on this issue. Our number to Crosstalk is 800-733-9829. That's 800-733-9829. Your response to the issue. We'll be back in a minute. You're listening to Crosstalk.
Racism is a charge often leveled in today's society. But did you know that we are all one race? Of one blood? We are all part of the human race. It is imperative for children to understand what God's Word says on this subject, that they know the true history of life so that we can build a truly Christian worldview and address the matter correctly. In the hardcover book, One Blood for Kids, author Ken Ham addresses this critical issue in a way that brings understanding to children. This book takes the reader on a spiritual journey presenting the real history of man, the connections between us, and how the variations of our skin tones reflect the creativity of our Creator. Fascinating facts and full-color illustrations are throughout the book. One Blood for Kids is available for a donation of $17 or 2 copies for a donation of $30 from VCY America. Call 1-800-729-9829.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America, and folks, we've seen the importance of borders. We see that importance in Scripture itself. God laid out the borders for Israel. We also see, as it says in Acts 17:26, and hath made of one blood all nations. God has made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitations, the borders of their habitations, the bounds there. I'd like to share with you a release that came forth from the Daily Wire, as they gave coverage to this issue after chaos at the U.S.-Mexico border on Sunday forced U.S. authorities to fire tear gas into a violent crowd of angry migrants seeking to enter the United States. President Trump on Monday warned that we will close the border permanently if need be. The president also said that many of the so-called migrants now gathered at the U.S.-Mexico border are stone-cold criminals, he said, and he urged Mexico to send them back to their homes any way you want. He said Mexico should move the flag-waving migrants, many of whom are stone-cold criminals, back to their countries. Do it by plane, do it by bus, do it any way you want, but they are not coming into the USA. We will close the border permanently if need be. Congress fund the wall, President Trump wrote on Twitter. The president's tweet came after hundreds of migrants charged the U.S. border near San Diego, prompting the U.S. Customs and Border Protection officials to fire tear gas, and that conflict led U.S. officials to shut down the San Ysidro port of entry between San Diego and Tijuana for more than 6 hours. As many as 6,000 migrants are now camping out in Tijuana. According to U.S. officials, the conflict was started by migrants. San Diego Sector Border Control Chief Patrol Agent Rodney Scott said on CNN that migrants approached border fences and immediately started throwing rocks and debris at our agents, and also taunting our agents. At once, our agents were assaulted, and the numbers started growing. You know, we had 2 or 3 agents at a time facing hundreds of people at a time. They deployed tear gas to protect themselves and protect the border. The chief of U.S. Border Patrol, Carla Provost, told Fox News that our agents were being assaulted. A large group approached the area, that they were throwing rocks and bottles at my men and women, putting them in harm's way, as well as many other members of the caravan. DHS will not tolerate this type of lawlessness and will not hesitate to shut down ports of entry for security and public safety reasons, said Kirsten Nielsen from the Department of Homeland Security. Mexico is heeding the president's warning. Top officials have pledged to beef up security near the border, and local authorities arrested 43 migrants in the incident on Sunday. And the story goes on there. But folks, the issue is truly before us right now, and getting your reaction to it here on Crosstalk at 800-733-9829. Margaret is calling from Pensacola, Florida. Margaret, you're on the air.
Oh, thanks for taking my call. Real quick, I was in Walmart, and I was approached by a woman, and I'm pretty sure she was a migrant person who got through, and who's been here. But when she approached me, she was asking for money from me, and I said, "Why are you asking me money?" She goes, "Well, I can't get a job because I can't get a Social Security number." So is that going to be a big problem for these migrant workers? They're going to start accosting people and make them feel guilty buying their, our own groceries and foods because they can't get a job, because they can't get a Social Security number.
It's very interesting, and there are those that are pushing for said Social Security numbers to be given for them to, and there are those pushing just for open borders and to allow anyone in. But when you see the behavior that's taking place, would this be good public policy for America to open wide the gates?
Well, this lady, she just gave me a big guilt trip about buying cat food, and she couldn't get a job because she couldn't get Social Security. So if we let all these people in, and everybody needs to eat. Everyone needs to go somewhere and buy food, or they're going to steal it from people, and they can't get a job without getting Social Security. And so it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you for your thoughts here. Our number 800-733-9829. Many are wanting to enter the social services of the United States. Our number 800-733-9829. Deb is calling from Richland Center, Wisconsin. You're on the air, Deb.
Yes, I just wanted to let everybody know that I'm very supportive of all that can be done for the border control. I'm a grandma that stays home with a couple of grandchildren, and I worry about the future generations, and I just am praying for those that are down there protected.
Thank you, Deb.
Yep.
Appreciate the call. Next to Crystal Falls, Michigan. Ron, you're on the air.
Hi, I was wondering, there's been a lot of talk about the Army being down on the border, and I can kind of understand that, but what is the job of the National Guard?
Well, that is
they supposed to guard our nation?
Well, yeah, the National Guard is present. Many National Guard forces are there too, Ron.
All right. Well, they shouldn't have any thing to say about that. I mean, they are guarding our nation.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, okay.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for the call. Yeah, and military has been used primarily in support means of border security and putting up the razor wires and allowing border patrol agents, etc., to be freed up to do their job on the lines there as well. Our phone number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. That's 800-733-9829. The Daily Signal reports that on that 3 past occasions, presidents temporarily closed the southern border, something President Donald Trump threatened yesterday to do permanently. We have Presidents Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan both closed the border over drug-related issues that halted entry from Mexico into the United States. Also, President Lyndon Johnson, shortly after taking office amid crisis, closed the border after the assassination of his predecessor, John F. Kennedy. All 3 cases dealt with the president's authority to act on the border during an emergency. And there are those who are challenging the president in that regard, but certainly precedent has seen that upheld in the past. Let's go to Garden Grove, California. Sharon, thanks for calling Crosstalk. You're on the air.
Yes, good afternoon, Jim. I wanted to speak. I live, obviously, in California, so I see the ramifications of illegal aliens every single day. And the lady who was just calling about people requesting a handout because they don't have a Social Security card, here I have seen evidence of people using American Social Security numbers so that they can work. And, of course, that would be worse. That is worse than giving somebody some money and being made to feel guilty. But there are a whole myriad of issues. I have been hit 3 times by illegal aliens and had to get my car repaired, and nothing happened to them. It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. So this is a sore spot for me, and one that I'm just in constant prayer that the Lord would give me wisdom in how to pray for this situation.
Yeah. Sharon, thanks for sharing firsthand the experiences that you're facing there as you're witnessing it on a daily basis.
Yes, and they vote here too, and they're not ashamed to tell you that they vote.
Thank you for the call. Ron is next in Tri-Cities, Washington. You're on the air.
Yes, I met a fellow who was trying to get his wife into the United States from the Philippines. His wife spoke fluent English. She was a dentist. He had spent thousands of dollars, and he was still not able to get his wife in. These people can just storm across the border. Plus, they're cutting in line. There's a lot of people who want to come in, and these folks are just cut. Imagine if you're in a line to go to a stadium, and people just keep cutting in line in front of you. This is more than outrageous. It's absolutely treasonous what some of the people in our government are doing.
Ron, thank you for your thoughts on it. And folks, laws need to be enacted here, and it's the Congress that enacts legislation. You can contact your members of Congress at 202-225-3121. That's 202-225-3121. Your senator is 202-224-3121. Robert is next in Apple Valley, California. Robert, you're on the air.
Yes, hello, Jim. God bless you, and praise God for your program. Again, I've called before on the issue of what's going on out here with the illegals and lawlessness here. We need to do everything we can to keep that border closed or secured and whatever it takes to keep those illegals out. Those that want to come into the country legally, able to be processed, I have no problem with. But being out here in California, if half the people in this country truly understood what was going on with the illegal populations in this country, they would absolutely be appalled to see people get welfare who have no way of being documented, who say they don't have any documentation on the fathers. The fathers are working. The mothers are getting welfare. So the fathers are getting paid. The mothers are getting paid. They're riding around in brand new cars, houses. It's unbelievable. And then what you have to understand is when you let people in that come in lawlessly, then everything they do past that point is going to be lawless, whether they're working illegal, identification, lying about children, lying about spouses. It just escalates. So we definitely need to keep those borders closed, and we need to correct the problem here in this nation.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate your thoughts on the issue. Our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. To West Dallas. Beth, you're on the air.
One thing I want to just mention to people is that the way the economy and everything is floating, the boomers are going to be the majority of people, if they haven't already retired, will be retiring. And we have a lot of people that are in that age group that are not only on Medicare, but Medicaid, and Medicare they paid for. But Medicaid is something else again, and whatever other disabilities or whatnot. So we have a large community of our own that we have to see to take care of as they age. We can't take on the whole world. Now, the other thing that always comes to mind, and this was even years ago, Jim, is if these people, because you know what, there are so many riches in these countries, minerals and water and oil and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it goes on and on, tourism. And if these people have much passion for their own countries to bring it about to a society where they could actually, gain from all these riches that they have there, we would be going down there for jobs.
Interesting thought. Thank you, Beth. Appreciate that. And taking your thoughts here today on the issue on Crosstalk. Let's go to McAllen, Texas. And Israel, you're on the air.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. I have more of a question than a comment, but I'm here on here at the border, at the Rio Grande Valley border, and I know everybody has been talking that these are caravans that are being funded. I've heard a couple of different sources that may be funding them, one being Soros, the other one being like Venezuela and stuff like that. But regardless of the fact, someone is definitely funding these caravans. Why isn't there anything in terms of the federal government doing anything to go against whatever organization or whatever person is funding it? That's an act of war, is it not?
Well, that's a great question, Israel. I don't have an immediate answer for it, but when we see the chaos and the havoc and the breaking of our laws, that does seem to subvert, our whole system of law and right and wrong here in this nation itself. You've raised a great question. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Again, folks, this is where your congressmen come into play on this very issue, and being in communication with them as to the chaos erupting as a result of lawlessness at the border. It's a reason why we have rules and laws and order here across this land, and this is something that's being done to subvert the rule of law. We'll be back with more of your calls in just 1 minute. This is Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewradio.com. For some time, Dr. Jimmy DeYoung and I on my broadcast have talked about the fact that we both believe that it's very likely that the enemies of Israel will attack America prior to their attacking Israel, so that America cannot come to the aid and defense of Israel. Recently, in my studies on electromagnetic pulse bombs, I discovered this. Al-Awzari, one of the leaders of Al-Qaeda, has openly called for a fatwa, or religious edict, to enlist his followers to carry out nuclear strikes against the United States of America, to use nuclear weapons against the American people, because, quote, there is no doubt that the greatest enemy of Islam and Muslims at this time is the Americans, end quote. He went on to call for striking America, the great Satan, before striking Israel, just as Jimmy DeYoung and I have predicted.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Interesting statement from Alan West, as reported on CNSnews.com. He said, I hear many people talking about the word asylum, so I figured I would do the simple thing and look up the definition, saying asylum is defined as the protection granted by a nation to someone who has left their native country as a political refugee. Asylum also has another meaning, he said. It's an institution offering shelter and support to people who are mentally ill. Something interesting to think about in this matter of asylum. Let's go back to the phone lines. We have Kim calling from Mequon, Wisconsin. Hi, Kim, you're on the air.
Hi, I have a question or comment, and if I'm being naive, please do say that I am. But thinking about all these immigrants, they are coming from countries and cultures and climate that is very, very close to what Mexico has. And I want to know why Mexico does not welcome these immigrants and let them settle there. It would increase their agriculture. The people, I think, would be more comfortable with the climate and the culture. And I think that I just don't understand why Mexico will not absorb this population. It's a very large country.
Thank you.
And I recall...
Yeah, Kim, and it's a matter of which Mexico has offered asylum, and reports have come out some weeks ago about the asylum offers, especially since President Trump was very strong in protecting our own borders, but the caravan not interested in that because they appreciate what America has to offer and to have the American dream. So it's not just that refuge from any kind of political situations going back to their own country, but to have opportunities that are here in the United States.
Well, why can't Mexico? I mean, I'm so disappointed in them. I mean, I know that they can be corrupt and not well managed, but it's unfeasible to me why this country so close to us cannot get their act together.
Well, thank you for your thoughts on that. And again, we find that Mexico has been offering asylum, but it's being rejected for the caravan's desire to come into the U.S. Let's go next to Florida, and we have Alan calling from Florida. Alan, you're on the air.
Hey.
Go ahead, Alan.
Hey, I have a comment on this whole border issue, and I just feel like that, on a personal level. It's sad to think that a mother is going to bring her 6-month infant on such a long and dangerous trip. And on a personal level, that can really hit home, and, it's something that we all want to keep in mind and pray for. But on the other hand, like you said, there are laws into effect for a reason, and I think we need to send a very, very clear message this time around so this type of thing doesn't happen and send the wrong message.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Alan. And believe me, there are organizations that are set up to help people in their homelands as well, to provide whether it be, the various relief supplies and help. And many have advocated that this would be the greater help rather than seeking to fund and house and feed people thousands of miles away from their own home and getting reestablished once again. Robert in Milwaukee, you're on the air.
Yes, I'm all for illegal. I'm all for legal immigration, but I mean, the thing is, how can we document these people for the simple fact we don't even know who they are? And on top of that, it's a known fact they have terrorists and gangbangers, MS-13, and drug traffickers coming in with them. The ladies with the babies and all that's just a shield. It's just the overlay for the underplay, and at the same time, it's a bigger movement behind us for all of Nancy Pelosi and all these other people who want the political spotlight, where they can just say, look at what the mean Republicans are doing to the immigrants. But that's not true. They should come over here legally. Just like I have a wife. She's from Nigeria. She came over here legally. We did all the paperwork. We struggle paying for it, but she's here legally and she's a productive citizen. They should do the same thing.
Yes. And this is really a slap in the face to those who go through the legal means to come into our country.
Exactly.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate your feedback on it. Christine is calling from Fort Wayne, Indiana. You're on the air, Christine.
Hi, I have a couple comments. One is, for those who support the immigrants coming in, how many would you like to take in and support? The other one is, I'm not sure how a state can block the president from doing what he wants to do, what he thinks is best for the country, but when I think that maybe we should ask that state that blocked the president from doing what he wanted to do, how many can you take in, 5,000, 10,000? It was a state that doesn't have borders. It was an island. We wouldn't have to worry about them crossing our border if he would have said that. Another comment, I lived in Southern California for a while. My father's vehicle was in a severe vehicle accident. The person who hit him took off. They had to because they were illegal. If you were illegal, what would you do? It's scary.
Thank you, Christine, for your comments here. And let's go to one last caller. This is Steve in Salina, Kansas. You're on the air, Steve.
Jim, Robert hit it on the head about this with the kids they hold up for shields. It's all a big ruse. And why isn't our government doing anything about it? You know why, Jim? Because our government is so infiltrated and watered down with leftism, communism. They actually want this in here because it's globalism. And it wouldn't be for Trump. You know, he is doing something. He's sending troops down there, but he's one man. So, you know what the best thing to do is just pray to God for wisdom and discernment.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate your call here today. And indeed, the prayer is critically important for this nation as we see the challenges that are coming. And what he said is true, is that even we're seeing the United Nations calling it a human right to be able to migrate from one country to the other. Folks, that is not a human right. Certainly we are a nation of laws. We're a nation that is a constitutional republic. And when we try to subvert that, we get into a heap of trouble. And that's where we're at in so many cases here today. Well, our time is gone. Thanks for listening to the program today as we talk about the critical issues that are impacting us across this nation. And tomorrow we'll continue talking about issues of great importance here to us as well. And we trust you'll join us on Crosstalk. Have a good afternoon.
Been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.